Um, so,
All right, you ready to do your update? And then we can start on the questions.
where to even start? I guess where to start is we don't know Hunter's whole side to this yet. We do know that there were things going on in Africa that are just simply not compatible with or included within our charter bank, the Global Family Bank, which is a public chartered bank. It's an American public chartered bank. And there are just certain things that you can't do under a public charter that Hunter was trying to do in Africa. So we tried to get hold of him to discuss this. That failed, and we had to pull the plug. So we removed him as director, and we tore up the charter because we couldn't be sure that the charter was being honored. And it was necessary to shut the door and basically seize our records and our accounts and fold up that entire operation because we couldn't be sure that it was being properly managed. And that's all very upsetting, and that's very it's problematic on many different levels, but it is forcing the issue that we've had with interference from the British Crown and from the Roman municipal corporations trying to basically assert that we are their citizenry and that they own us and that we can't issue our own sovereign money and blah, 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 blah. And of course, that's all based on nothing but fraud. And in breach of trust and in breach of contract fraud. So I took the extraordinary step this week of contacting the Pope directly and pointing out the realities of the situation. And let's face it, he is in a position not only of ultimate trust, but also a position in terms of worldly affairs, a position of ultimate power, because he is responsible for disciplining these things, these corporations, and he is also a major shareholder. Now, they may have divested some of their holdings. They may have, tried to make different arrangements of various kinds. But as of the most recent tracking of their affairs, the Pope has 100% ownership interest in the municipal corporations and a 60% interest in the British Crown Corporation. And it's been that way since the early 1600s at least. So he's on the hot plate, so to speak. Now, the other thing that I did this week that is extraordinary is that I issued 117 item sworn, affirmed, under perjury testimony in the form of an affidavit. And I also issued it as a video. So the entire world has me, and there is no doubt which Anna Maria Reisinger is speaking. And there is no doubt that it is being spoken with words. and it is available for everyone to see. I, in the flesh, sat down and read the entire thing into the record, the public record of the known world. Everybody can hear it and take in every little detail of it, transcribe it, be sure of it, know that, yes, I said all of this, and I have brought it forth before everyone and everywhere, and in particular to the Trump administration, to the Secretary of State, to the Secretary of the Treasury, to the Department of Justice, to the IRS and the Internal Revenue Service, to the British Crown Corporation, to the British Crown, to the British government, to the Roman municipal government, to the Vatican government, to the Pope, to the generals, to the Pentagon, to the U.S. Army, to the U.S. Navy, to the banking authorities, to the World Bank, to the United Nations. They all received it. They all got it, direct copies, and they got multiple copies because it was issued in all 3 jurisdictions, and they all have proof of that now. So the videotaped, call it a deposition, is available on YouTube and will be available directly online. And the written version, the actual document, has been scanned and it has been emailed to all of the above. This has been emailed to all of the above. So now everybody has sworn actionable proof. Okay? They have it in their hot little hands. Somebody actually stood up and said it. And now they are on the tenterhooks of their own law. They either stop messing around, stop registering American babies as British subjects, stop claiming that we're their citizenry, stop seizing upon our property assets, stop arbitrarily charging us taxes for things that we could not possibly receive. They either stop the entire mess, or they admit forever and ever that they're criminals. Now, of course, the slander machine is in full tilt, the British Crown slander machine. What began with misrepresenting our great-great-uncle Clintwood Belcher as a horse thief, when in fact he was the victim of their ambush, is going on with more of their clack, 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 trying to pretend that I owe them. They're trying to pretend that I owe them federal income taxes. In order to owe federal income taxes, folks, look at the very first section of Title 26, which is their title for the income tax. And in the first paragraph, or 2 at most, it says that it affects people who are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States in small THE. And by now you all know that you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the municipal government, such as it is. You all know that you're Americans, that you're non-citizens, that you're state nationals. And you're not subject to the municipal government centered in the District of Columbia. You're not subject to the municipal government. You're not here begging them for asylum. You're not here needing their assistance or seeking their assistance. No. Now, the other thing you have to know is that the U.S. Supreme Court has only given one definition of income in its entirety, and it basically said, we're going to give you a definition of income, and then that's it. We're never going to consider this question again. And the definition of income that they gave was profit separated from capital. They are telling you that income is the profit of a corporation. By definition, if you're not operating a corporation, you have no income. And unless you have it from a federal source, it's not federal income. And finally, if they were trying to present anything else, if they were trying to say that your earnings or your gifts or anything of that sort was federal income, they would have to admit that they were guilty of either peonage or slavery. Because they literally cannot show a check addressed to you, signed by you, entered into any of your accounts that you had anything to do with, from Uncle Sam. We are the victims of one of the biggest fraud schemes in human history. A fraud scheme of unimaginable duration and unimaginable breadth, depth, and width. But it is a fraud scheme. And I fully detailed it in 117 separate items read into the public record of the world for all to see. Now that takes, I haven't actually looked, but it was quite a while. I was reading it for probably 45 minutes to an hour. Maybe Shannon has a more exact length for that. It is rather lengthy.
1 hour, 2 minutes, 38 seconds.
Okay, 1 hour, 2 minutes, and 38 seconds to change the world. And the actual document, the written end of it, is 13 pages in 12-point print. So for me, that's a lot. But you have it both in the video and you have it in the written form that is being distributed now. Now, the further update on the bank is that Hunter appears to have been running a two-account system, which is not at all illegal or unusual, but the Federal Reserve notes were going into a normal account at Citibank, and then the AFD were being accounted for, entered in another vault account that deals with nothing but AFD. And you can see that the FRNs are basically debt notes, right? So they're in the commercial debt note, credit certificate, commercial paper side of things, while the AFD are asset-backed money. So they don't belong in the same account. This is the whole essence of an exchange like this. And so far as we know, the only such exchange that exists is the one that was created with the 1934 Emergency Banking Act. So that one-on-one exchange was accomplished, but what it left was all the FRNs in one account at Citibank and all of the AFD in our vault account. Okay, so the exchange took place as it was happening. You put one FRN in the Citibank vault account, and you got an AFD in the Global Family Bank vault account, because this is a currency exchange. All right. Now the rumor is out and about that the money from the Citibank account is all gone. Well, number one, it wasn't money to begin with. Number two, you've got scads of federal court judges that have already told you that it has no actual value. And even if you did steal it all, nothing would happen. Number three, they've already made plans and made all the arrangements to seize all of that anyhow. Okay, so I'm saying we don't care if they seized all of the FRNs in the Citibank account. But here's the thing. We need to know, just for the sake of knowing, we need to know if the IRS and DOJ are the ones that seized those FRNs, or if Hunter spent them. And at this point, it could be true either way. So we're going to be digging into that. There are also some questions as to whether or not the early people who put their money in most recently, we want to be sure that they have that account got updated. So there's a bunch of work to be done in terms of figuring out, did everything get properly credited? What we may do is set up a committee and have everybody who has put money in the vault system report to that committee how much you put in. Just, send the number and your name, contact, email, that sort of thing. No big thing to go through, but just how much and your name and your email, or, your mailing address. But just to make sure that everybody got properly accounted. Okay, so that's what's going on with that. We are having a major league come to Jesus meeting with the government that has been here doing all of this behind our backs. We are having a major league well, let's put it this way. In order to pull this off, the generals had to be complicit to some extent. The banks had to be complicit to some extent. And most of all, the bar associations had to be complicit. This could not have been pulled off. It could not have operated this way for over 150 years without all three of parts of those organizations being compromised, fully compromised. Somebody had to know what was really going on and how all this was being worked behind the scenes against the people of this planet. Can do debt notes. The licensed banks can do entitlements. The licensed banks can do loans of your own credit to you and charge you interest for the privilege of having access to your own credit. Imagine it. But that's not what our bank was ever designed to do. That's not in its roster of abilities. If Hunter was making loans and that sort of thing, we hadn't even opened up any of our commercial banks. So it is a given that we weren't involved in commerce. We weren't involved in making loans or collecting usury or doing any of that. And if we had been, it would all be under American law, not British law, anyway. So if Hunter has a license, he's got a banking license from them, okay? It cannot possibly be anything to do with us. And this was another concern that we got word back from Africa, that there was some sort of weird loan deal going on where he promised to loan people $1,000 and then they had to pay it back within 7 years and all this kind of thing. And that's not within the parameters of the Global Family Bank we chartered. So this is why we pulled the plug on him. This is why we removed him as director. This is why we notified the banking authorities, because that isn't part of our version of the Global Family Bank doesn't do that and isn't empowered to do that. So anyway, that's where that sits. And in the meantime, we are quickly putting together a better and more astute team to make sure that this never happens again. Number 2, we're introducing better equipment. We are going open source so that we're not dependent at all on any of the Microsoft or Palantir or any of that crap. And we are basically looking forward to having our system back up and running pretty darn quick. But obviously this is setting us back a little bit. But give us a month or 2. We'll have it whipped. We'll have it really back and better than it ever was, because this whole experience we've learned a lot. We've learned about the technologies. We've learned about security systems. We've learned about how they've been messing with the international banking law in order to create two gigantic banking monopolies, and how they planned to use this as a means to enslave the people of this planet. So we have kind of busted the whole thing. And when we have this back together and have our American chartered bank back online, it won't be called the Global Family Bank. We'll transfer the assets we have that are ours from the Global Family Bank, the records and data and accounts and all of that. We will transfer that, but we won't be using that name just in case they're trying to mirror us or something of that sort again. And we won't be so alone either. You know, there were only a few banks that got it when we first started. Now with the bilateral banking system coming on, and going open source and not having to deal with these cretins at all anymore, we've already got 75 banks and more are coming. So, I actually feel really good about this, strangely enough. It's forcing things to a head so that the entire world can see what's been going on here. It's going to force the release of our funds. It's going to force a restructuring and redirection of the whole entire system, if you will. And it's going to open up a lot of opportunity, you know, a lot of freedom that people haven't had for years. So, you know, maybe Hunter got twisted around. We've seen that before where people get confused and do things that put them right back in the same old, same old. That's what appears to have happened. Maybe he was threatened. We were told by credible sources that they witnessed him being threatened, and his family and everybody else being threatened in a very criminal way. We don't have that testimony sworn under penalty or anything, but it's a credible witness. And so he may have been commandeered, as they say. Or maybe he was just a rat. We don't know yet. And always with such things, it's best to not judge. Now, don't fly off the handle, make quick judgments, think that, oh, well, thus and so, you know, that's for little kids. We're grown adults. When we're faced with a situation like this and someone goes completely off the ranch and starts doing things that don't make any sense, you have to take into account that there are many possible explanations. And until a thorough investigation is conducted, we won't know. So let's just lay off any slander or assumption or presumption. Let's keep our heads and realize that as far as you're concerned, you have AFD waiting for you, which was always the intention anyway. Now, our new system does allow for free trade, and I can explain to you, they've been trying to keep our banks from participating in quote unquote their system. But the fact is that under treaty, they have to allow American banks and American trade unions and American everything. There's nothing in our treaties or our agreements with them, the constitutions. There's nothing to suggest that they have control of our ability to conduct international trade. And in fact, the entirety of Title 15 of federal law very clearly says that obstruction of trade is a crime. So not only do they not have any treaty or other control, they don't have any way of denying our access. So the only thing that they've been doing is claiming that they don't know who we are and that they don't have any treaties with us, or that we're citizenry of theirs and therefore we don't have any treaties and we don't have any rights and we don't have any constitutional guarantees. You see, this was all a fraud scheme that was directly related to impersonating us and then evading their treaties, their debts, and their obligations to serve. And now they've been called out on the carpet in front of God and all the rest of the sentient beings. They have no excuse. They're revealed as dishonorable, criminal. Okay? And you now have it in the can. You have me swearing out there saying, okay, guys, this is what happened. This is what happened to me. And I used myself as the prime example because, number one, I have control of me and my information, right? I can't swear anything for you. Number two, there were aspects of my situation where in order to bring them to bay at common law, you have to actually be injured. If they had done all of this and I was not injured by it, then they could claim, well, she wasn't injured. She doesn't have cause to complain. Her property wasn't injured. She wasn't injured. So there's no injured party, you know? However, in my case, they injured me. So under common law, under commercial law, under international law, under contract law, which is commercial, but which deals with their obligations under the constitutions, they have committed all the sins against me. They may not have committed all the sins against you, but they have definitely committed all the sins and errors against me. So that's the second reason that I used myself as the case, so that everybody can see how these people really operate, what they really do, how they actually betray their positions of trust, how they operate under color of law, how they contrive to force others to pay their taxes for them, how they contrive to impersonate their employers so that they can evade their obligations under the constitutions, how they actually purposefully, with malice aforethought, try to promote the idea that this is being done under conditions of war and under, wartime occupation, when actually it's nothing but an illegal mercenary occupation of this country and always has been. My testimony covers it all. And, the fact that our states were never even involved in the Civil War makes it that much more damning. Because the Civil War, which wasn't a war, which was a mercenary conflict from day one, it was never declared by any Congress. There was no peace process afterward. There was no peace treaty, nothing of that sort. And the third thing that is absolutely damning is that when they inducted all the people that were fighting in this conflict, it was under the auspices of the state of New York, the state of New Jersey. It was state organizations that were involved. And the people who signed up and fought, I'm sure, were never told that they were signing up as mercenaries. But these state-of-state organizations are businesses. They're incorporated businesses that promoted and created the whole conflagration. And that is one of the definitions of a civil war. It's when bureaucracies go head to head. But actually, what we would say properly is a civil mercenary conflict. And they have used the pretense of war to get away with this. So, it is not an understatement to say that this is a stake through the heart of the vampires. Okay? This is a stake and a silver bullet and a cross and garlic and holy water on their entire system. Thankfully, there is a simple, swift, and proper response. The simple, swift, and proper response is to nationalize all these corporations and bring them back under the public law. All of a sudden, they have to actually obey the public law of the country where they're at. They can no longer pull all this crap. And that is, I believe, other than dissolution, the only option there is. It's called lawful conversion. They can lawfully convert all of these corporations to function under the authority of the national government. Or they can liquidate them, dissolve them like the witch and the Wizard of Oz, right? And if they liquidate them, then everything is chaotic. Then you've got massive, massive disruption of everything. Because suddenly these corporations disappear. They no longer have a legal persona, nor any lawful persona, and all their assets just now that is an option that can be applied selectively. For example, they can look at the situation and say, Pfizer did this and caused the deaths of millions of innocent people. So, goodbye, Pfizer. Liquidate it. They can look at Bayer and Monsanto and all these other corporations that have become transnational conglomerates, but that all share the same history of having murdered and maimed and killed millions of people for profit. And they can liquidate those selectively, one by one. I have a hit list of my own. They put me on a hit list. I've got a hit list for their corporations. Corporations that have, over the course of decades, not just, one instance like Dow Chemical with Agent Orange. Oh no. We have corporations in this world who have made their bucks on fooling the public, poisoning the public, killing people. They've been used for criminal purposes from almost their inception, and they've gotten away with it because guess what? The people that were supposed to be riding herd on these things didn't. That seems to be a common thread throughout all of this, is that those who were responsible for oversight and discipline and taking measures against corporations that were operating in an unlawful fashion or for unlawful purposes simply looked the other way. As long as it was profitable, they went, oh, I didn't see that thing about Agent Orange. Oh, I didn't know that that caused hundreds of spontaneous abortions. Oh, we didn't know that that poisoned the infants and caused sudden infant death syndrome. Yeah, they have ignored so much that it's not even plausible. And yet, we now have the obligation clearly stated under penalty of perjury. So yes, they have an option there where they can individually liquidate all of these corporations that are guilty of these heinous crimes, and they can remove what's called corporate veil. So the theory that they started out with when they began allowing all these corporations to exist and gave them a legal person, okay, was that there was a veil that existed between the corporate world and the actual physical world. And this veil protected the corporation to the extent that the investors could not be reached in a bankruptcy. So, for example, you've got 100 investors, they all get together, they invest in the ABC Corporation, and this veil supposedly stands between them and the corporation. So if the corporation is bankrupted or dissolved for cause or something of this nature, then the stockholders, the shareholders are held harmless, and the creditors of the corporation cannot go beyond the corporate veil and attach the holdings of the shareholders. However, when a corporation is managed recklessly, when a corporation does evil that results in harm to living people, then that corporate veil can be removed. And the stockholders and boards of directors responsible for letting this corporate management act in this fashion become liable. Without that protection of the so-called corporate veil, their personal fortunes are on the line. And in some cases, that is highly merited. So as part of the dissolution, you can have a plain dissolution of the corporation and its assets. They can be sold off, destroyed, whatever. But then you have the extra step that you can not only dissolve the corporation, you can remove the corporate veil and go after the boards of directors and the shareholders that allowed this corporation to operate in such a manner. And there should be some of that too. Now, my claim, I have 3 claims. I did not go into the claims in this video testimony. The 3 claims are in favor of the people of Tartaria, who were pretty much murdered. A claim on behalf of all living people, right? And a claim for my own ancestral assets, which have been latched upon in the same ridiculous impersonation scheme. And here's the thing. When we're born and we come into this world, we come in completely clean. There's no slate, there's no name, there's no religion, there's no political party, there's no nationality. We're just alive. And then almost upon the instant we're born, we're dumped on. And all of these other attributes are assumed upon us. Okay? And we don't know. I mean, think about this. I was born, and in my case, my first conscious memory was when I was 6 months old. A lot of people can't remember that far back. But my first conscious memory, we can date. That first 6 months, I don't recall anything. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. I didn't know that I was being misidentified as a British subject. Okay? I didn't know that I had a name, that I had been given a name to use. And none of you remember any of this either. At that point in your life, you didn't know your name. You didn't know it was a given name. You didn't know how any of this stuff worked. You didn't know that you were a citizen or non-citizen or what it meant to be a national. You were just a baby in your cradle, right? So you can't directly testify as to whatever went on when you were 3 weeks old. And you can't even really know for sure that you are who you think you are, because, I mean, what happens that you can't remember is beyond your ability to swear to, right? You can only swear to it to the extent that certain things were recorded, certain things were remembered by people who were old enough to remember, okay? But you yourself don't know who you are. And you have no absolute guarantee that the baby that was separated from your mother, or who you think was your mother, was actually you. You see what I mean? You could be switched literally in a hospital nursery for another baby, and nobody but the mother would know. And even the mother wouldn't be sure. And I'll tell you what the deal is. The mother can smell her own baby. Now that sounds like something kind of rude, like, dogs and cats, but we're mammals. And the mother can identify her offspring by scent. And that's something that's been, scientifically investigated. So she would be the only one who might know for sure or have good reason to believe that a particular baby was not hers. Okay? So you have one witness who might detect if a child was not hers. Otherwise, totally simple to change one baby for another and have a completely different identity. I'm just saying all of this, pointing it out to you, how the difficulty of identity runs. It's hard to prove who you are. If it really comes down to brass tacks, it's hard. And what finally determines it is your DNA. Your DNA absolutely shows who you are in a way that nothing else does. because it connects you through the mitochondria and through the haplogroups to specific families, specific bloodlines. And this is something that we've only recently had access to for that kind of purpose, but we do have access to it now. So I'm just as amazed as everybody else that I have been told, whether it's true or not, so far as everything that goes on in this world and how we can't ever actually prove that we know by our own recognizance who we are, right? That I am the heir of the Saint Germain Trust. Now, I did not come up with that idea. That was not something that I ever postulated. That is something that has been told to me by experts. But anyway, since they told me that, I put in a bid to receive back our family trust with the intent that it would be used within the meaning and intent of the trust. So anyway, when somebody makes a trust to you, they can do it verbally or they can do it with a written document. And it's strongest if they do it both ways. And it's stronger if they do it with witnesses, right? This is just common sense. So that's why, in addition to covering all three jurisdictions, that's why I did the entire testimony in a video, plus doing it as a document. And that's, it's the same thing with these claims for trusts and for, on behalf of other people. For me, there is the irrevocable will, which is published. So everybody knows where I'm coming from. When I put in a claim for the people of Tartaria, I'm doing so as a Tartarian because I have that bloodline, but I'm also doing it for all the other people who have the Tartarian bloodline, not just me, all of us, all of those who share that particular heritage. And what it does, as it is done here in the United States, is that it says, okay, you've got an inheritance. And there's a difference between an entitlement and an inheritance. I put in the claim on behalf of a whole lot of people to come get their inheritance back. And to get restitution for all the taxes they paid in quote unquote error. To get restitution for all the bills that were charged off to you that weren't yours. To get restitution for all the remedy that was denied to you. So if you want to think about this very simply, think of public chartered bank giving back restitution which is return of money that you paid in error or that was owed to you as damages. And inheritances and then think about private licensed banks sending out welfare entitlements and making loans of your own credit back to you. These are two completely separate, different things. And I want you to know the difference so that you're not rooked into thinking that and mistaking a British Crown operation for what we are doing with the American public chartered banks. Two different animals, two different jurisdictions, two different modes of operating in the world. And even if and when we open a commercial bank, which we certainly can do, it will be operating under American law. It won't be operating under British law. And it will be different. It won't be operating the way these British maritime banks operate. We won't be seeking an inequitable and unearned security interest, and we'll only be dealing with actual corporations. You see, there is a hard and fast rule that they have attempted to evade, and that hard and fast rule is that commercial banks are limited to loaning to businesses, to incorporated entities. And that's why they had to incorporate you and make up these franchises and run this entire little scheme, this impersonation and identity theft scheme in the background, was to evade and avoid that requirement. So even if we do at some point along here, and we plan to, open up banks that serve businesses, as apart from banks that serve living people, they will stand under American law, and they will actually be serving businesses, not people. They'll be a separate class of bank. They'll be clearly identified, and you'll go to them if you want to do such things as get a loan to pursue your business expansion or something of that sort. At this point, it's unclear exactly what the future of commercial businesses are and commerce itself. Remember that commerce is business between two incorporated entities. And the way things are looking and all of the damage that has been done by these corporations, we might just throw up our hands and say, what do we need them for? We don't really need any corporations. People can still do business without having a corporation. These things have been used for bad purposes. So why don't we just do away with the whole idea of corporations and go back to a world where businesses have to be responsible and accountable for their acts? Think of that. I've told you the story of how corporations came into being. It was back about the time that dynamite was invented by Nobel. And this was seen as something that was important, that was useful. You could use dynamite to, extract minerals and do selective, explosions, and you could use it to demolish things that needed demolishing. And, dynamite was useful. It had valid uses. However, nobody would accept the liability of producing it, because it could be used for bad purposes too. And that's how corporations got their foot in the door. They excused the use of corporations and the corporate veil, protecting shareholders from being liable for things that the corporation did by creating the whole concept of corporations and the corporate veil and all of that. That's how they got investors and shareholders to invest in things like dynamite production. Okay? But really, is that the only way of doing that? Is that really what we have to put up with? A whole bunch of legal fiction entities that create their own world and usurp upon ours? Or is the best and safest thing to just be honest about the situation and, draw some lines in the sand and say, okay, you can produce dynamite, but da 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 da. There are pros and cons to corporations, and in the modern world, that hasn't even been discussed in 150 years. Let me suggest that with the pandemic and all the other things that have gone on here, it's long past time for that discussion. Okay.
Okay, who wound the crank on the monkey? I don't know, but coming up with your first question for the day. Can you give us more details about the judgment that is coming in 3 years that you have mentioned a few times in your papers? Thank you.
Well, according to the latest astronomical data that I have been able to obtain, and according to the Sumerian tablets, we are about to be visited again in about 3 years. And because of the length of time involved between when the calculations were first made and now, it's a little bit difficult to judge exactly when, but we'll be facing something that hasn't happened in millennia. And we did have a somewhat similar incident in 526 and 1582, when a large enough magnetic center approaches the Earth, the electromagnetic grid that wraps the Earth gets pulled. And it's like pulling a net. And when that happens, then all sorts of different things happen. You get extreme tides. You get all sorts of disturbances in the electromagnetic conductivity of the entire planet through the air jurisdiction. You wind up with weak fields in some areas and strong fields, super strong fields in other areas. You get the pole could be shifted literally overnight. You get all sorts of odd things happening when this happens. And according to the information that we have right now, we're due for one of these events in about 3 years. And instead of telling the people what's happening or why it's happening, the pikers, true to form, have tried to hide it behind pseudoscience, like, human-caused global warming. And tried to use that as a excuse for draconian carbon taxes. Anyway, this time around, everybody's going to know. And, whatever it means for us, it means. Now, what can we do about it? That is up to us to explore over the next little time that we have. Whether it's 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, it's still something that is very much kind of written in the stars and in the electromagnetic fields. And we are absolutely going to talk about this in public. We're not going to try to hide it or stand there and say that we didn't know it was coming. We hope that it can be moderated. There are things we can do. One of the things that we can do is that everybody can accept being awakened. And I know that sounds strange, but each one of us, in certain ways, have been lulled asleep, or in some respects, never awakened. We were born into this world, and our abilities were not taught to us. We all have more abilities, more basic senses, more built-in powers, if you want to call them powers. We all have more built-in powers than we're ever taught. And so discovering these and making use of these is a major thing that we can do over the next however long we've got. Because we do have extraordinary powers of clairsentience, memory, ability to project electromagnetic fields, ability to change electromagnetic fields, ability to communicate telepathically, ability to speak multiple languages as one language. I know that seems very strange, but there are those of us who have recouped an ability to understand all languages. And this is not with any kind of, it's not with any implants. It's not with any kind of cyborg type stuff. It's just natural abilities that we never woke up. We never knew that we had. We never actually learned how to operate. Okay? So what we can do as individuals, starting right now, is to explore ourselves. And, one of the easiest things is simply to say, I choose to remember.
Okay, ready for the second question? When will our passports be issued by our post office?
Oh, well, this is an interesting thing. I just got a U.S. Supreme Court ruling about that, and I'll be sending it out as an article. So you'll be all pleased to know that no, they can't keep us from traveling. Anyway, I'll get into the details of that in an article, and I'll share the Supreme Court decision. You don't have to wait for our government to issue passports. Passports are not something that can be used against living people. That was the rest.
Okay. Will there be a release of fabrics or clothing, etc., that will actually be healthy for us?
Well, hopefully we're going to completely re-engineer everything so that it's healthy for us, not just fabrics, but everything. I mean, if of all of the institutions that have failed, the Food and Drug Administration stands right up there, okay? It's in the top 10, if not the top 5, because everybody's idea that this was going to be a government snooper agency that would keep the corporations from producing crap and foisting it off on the public were totally betrayed. Let's put it that way. But hopefully we're going to be able to get the fluoride out of the water. We're going to replace it with silver. It turns out that silver has a very long history of being an antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral agent. It's still what's used in hospitals. They don't tell you this, but when there's a really bad burn case and a person is, has large patches of skin that is sloughing off and has been totally open to infection, they wrap that person in silver sheets, literally like shake and bake, like aluminum foil, only it's silver. Okay? Why do they do that? Because silver has amazing antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal properties. And I was just told today by our favorite sailor that as far back as this, the days of the big sailing ships, they used silver in the water barrels for the same purposes, which led to the sailors being healthier than the regular populace. That's also the reason that the nobles and royalty all drank from silver cups and ate from silver plates and used silver utensils. And no doubt that contributed to them living longer than all the rest of the people in the kingdom. So we are not going to continue things like fluoridation. We're not going to continue things like bleaching flour and then, quote unquote, enriching it by putting back artificial versions of vitamins that were extracted from the flour. We're not going to have the preservative madness that has been poisoning generations of people. And we're going to have a come to Jesus about product labeling. All of those things. You're not going to be able to call something organic just because it's made out of primarily carbon. And that's just starters. That's just one observation. So when it comes to clothing, when it comes to sheets, when it comes to blankets, when it comes to everything that you can think of, yes, it's long overdue that we concentrated on health, not just product utility. And that will begin immediately. I mean, the moment that these things get turned over, there will be a mad dash for everybody to take a different look at a great many products that we've taken for granted. Shannon?
Okay, next one. Now that my digital prosperity card is funded, could you tell me how I can use my digital prosperity card?
There are no digital prosperity cards that have been funded in the proper way, is what I would say. There may be digital prosperity cards that are due to British citizens or British subjects. But in exchange for taking that prosperity card, they're giving up their land, their freedom, everything. So don't fall for it. Don't take the bait. The British Crown has been using the assets of the people for its own benefit and doling out entitlements. And entitlements can look like inheritances. This is how they're trying to fool everybody. They're trying to get you to accept an entitlement instead of an inheritance, because they want to hold on to your inheritance and direct it and control it and tell you what you can do and can't do. They want to control you through that prosperity card because they own the account and they own what's passing as money in that account. So if you play that game, realizing that when you take that bait, they're going to take your estate. They're going to take your good name. They're going to take everything you own naturally and everything you are, and they're going to use it all for their benefit, and then they're going to dole out this little bit. And that's not what you want. That's not what you need. That's not what you deserve. So I'm just warning you, if you get any offers from Hunter or people talking about a prosperity card, it's not coming from us. This is the big move of the British Crown trying to, basically mirror us and because we've been talking about our prosperity system, they're trying to commandeer it, come in, convert it, and, start offering these little entitlement dollops and these quote unquote prosperity cards. But that's not what this is about. This is about restitution. This is money owed to you. This is about inheritance. So please read the articles that I've been producing the last couple of weeks, and you'll get the drift of this. Shannon?
Okay, coming up with the next question. It's been 9 months since your home was stolen. Once your home is restored to you, then we should be able to do a process to restore homes to others who's likewise had their home stolen. Have you been able to make tangible headway in bringing the case forward with the de facto that be in order to bring the restoration/restitution into fruition? Wow, this is a wordy one. How does she envision seeing the process evolve and finally restore you to wholeness? What is next in the process of development?
Well, I have not done a whole lot other than to stake my claims. I have not done a whole lot about the situation with my house, because as I've always told everybody, it does no service to keep chasing brush fires in a stacked court system that isn't even really a court system. Okay? They have a 96% conviction rate, or, whatever a conviction represents. Okay? And they just sat there all day long in these phony courts, administering these phony estates however they want. So there's no point in following all those brush fires, and I've told everybody this for many years. Go after the arsonists. And so when it comes to me and my houses and the things that they've stolen from me, I've taken my own advice. I have not gone into their courts. I have not, wasted my breath. I have not I've posted my claims. I've made them public. I have, faced off their courts. I have said what I'm going to say. I've laid it down there in the public testimony, right? And other than that, I haven't done a whole lot other than to keep pursuing the arsonists. And what I just did in releasing the testimony, it's called diplomatic testimony, as a video, and releasing the actual signed document backing it up, is to bring forward a series of claims that not only include my problem, but include by the similar process that was used, includes everybody else that has suffered illegal takings and illegal confiscations and impersonation and all the rest of it. When you see this testimony, you're going to realize that it really is a stake through the heart of the vampires. And it deals with the loss of my home. It deals with the threats. It deals with the abuses of the justice system. It deals with illegal taxation. It deals with the false pretense of war and the illegal mercenary occupation of our country. It deals with all of that. But most of all, it deals with the impersonation scheme. And so you'll see what I'm doing about my house and your house and everybody else's house that has been stolen by these thugs. And we're putting it squarely on the Pope, on the Roman Curia, on the British Crown, and on all these feckless governments that have allowed this. So you'll see, just, go ahead and listen to the recorded testimony, the live testimony, and then also read the document. It's only 13 pages, but it's single-spaced 12-point print.
Fine print's a bitch. Okay, out of curiosity, you keep saying other countries need our help. Well, we need help here. Why are we helping them before we help ourselves?
We're not. It's just that our state assemblies are taking so damn long to form up and do their duty that, half of them are not ready to be organized. They're not organized enough. So the other thing is that, so what if we organize ourselves and there's nobody to trade with? Then we've got this little microcosm. Pardon me. We've got this little microcosm, but nobody to trade with. No?
Okay, next question. Do I need to make my own Z tags or do we have an outlet to buy them? Requirements need to make a Z tag are what? Thank you for your effort and time spent.
Z tags were mandated by the Board of Governors. I'm sorry, I'm having my traditional mid-afternoon sneezing fit a bit late today. Z tags were mandated by the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve Banks, and they were covering their butts. They realized that while a public interest was being claimed in your cars and autos, there was still a private interest in the cars and autos. And so it was set up so that if you were just using a car or a truck for your own use, go visit the grandkids, go to the grocery store, you're not using it for any commercial purpose, then you could get a Z tag and be exempt from commercial taxes and commercial statutory law and all that stuff. Well, time went on and they redefined all of us with these corporation entities, these franchise corporations operating in the background. And so they used those to pretend that we were all always commercial entities and we were all always involved in commercial activities. And all cars and trucks, of course, were then commercial vehicles. And then that gave them the right to tax us and the right to haul us off to jail and the right to stop us for any reason on the road and to, presume all these statutory laws against us. So it's all part of their scheme. It's all part of their coercion and evasion, evading their obligations under the constitutions while gaining coercive power over the people. And it's all done through this impersonation scheme. It's all done by pretending that they're addressing these corporate entities while you're standing there right in front of them. So the Z tags were from an era when the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve realized that there was such a thing as private cars and private trucks. But now they've been using this fraud scheme and impersonation scheme for so long that they just do this blanket supposition that all cars and all trucks are commercial vehicles. And as we all know, that's a bunch of hooey. Some states have Z tags. Some states did it right. We have Z tags in Alaska. Some states don't even operate as states in a public view that you see. I mean, we have our assemblies, so the states are still operating, but there isn't a state there to provide license plates with a private designator. Frankly, it's a big mess, and it's a big mess because they've told so many lies for so long that there is no coherent answer. Ideally, things that are used for commercial business would have a different kind of plate entirely. And cars and trucks that are used for people to just go down to the grocery store and do their own traveling would have a different kind of plate. But you see, they've foisted off commercial plates on everybody so that they could bring them under commercial law. And they've created all of these franchise corporations and attached them to us so that they would have a handy handle to be able to pull us in and pretend that we were commercial entities and that we were operating as commercial entities. Now, I pointed out to you before that if you get out a magnifying glass and look at what appears to be the signature line on what appear to be your checks, you'll see that it's not a line. It is a line, but it's a line of microprint. And what that microprint says is some version of authorizing authority or authorized representative. And you're sitting there, you're going, authorized representative. Oh, they must mean authorized representative of the account. What else could it be, right? Well, but then if that's the case, why would they bother to go to such an extent to hide that? Why would they make this itty bitty 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 microprint that you couldn't possibly read with the naked eye? Why would they hide that? Well, it's obvious that they hid that because they didn't want you to know that you were purportedly operating a franchise corporation, working as an employee or representative thereof, and therefore liable for it. See, they were hiding the whole commercial system. They were making it seem like it was your own account, but no, the account is held by a corporation. That account is held by a franchise corporation in either the British Crown system or the Roman municipal system.
Okie dokie. Next question. I do not have a mortgage on my home. Besides a meets and bounds survey, what else can I do to protect my land? Should I try to get a land patent? And if so, how do I go about doing that?
You already have a land patent or a land grant underlying the entire description and entitlement system. And there's a specific process you can follow that involves posting your interest in the land with a meets and bounds survey and, listing the different other appellations and descriptions and whatnot. It's an entire process that Ron Gibson pioneered. And Ron, unfortunately, has passed on, but his method of claiming back your land still exists, and it is still available. And you also have the Bucolic Law Firm that has set up the Bucolic Law website that is specially attuned to and is helping you to do this so that you can post your ownership interest and you can prove that it was posted for 60 days and, all that kind of stuff. So I would go to Bucolic Law and I would begin working with them. And there's a lot to it, but it's a simple process. The hardest part of it was proving that you'd posted it in public for 60 days. Okay, so go to Bucolic Law. There's a website on the net and start reading. Shannon, you there?
Sorry, forgot. I was asking you a question, but I didn't realize I was muted. Can you ask Anna why the mint is not producing silver eagles? Is it because the American government is back?
Well, they don't really have the ability to produce anything. What they were doing, they were producing commemorative coins. That's how they were getting around the fact that they can't actually issue money. Governments issue money. Corporations issue credits and debts. They've never had any ability to issue our money for us in our absence. And the reason that they haven't had the ability to lawfully and correctly issue money is that they seized upon the federal republic that was doing business as the United States and claimed it as abandoned property in 1871. But that does not mean that they necessarily got any permission from us to issue our money. They didn't. Instead, what it was supposed to happen by operation of law is that when the Federal Republic stopped operating, and even more importantly, the Confederation of States stopped operating, everything that had been delegated should have rolled back to the delegator. And we've gone through the example of, you know, you have a contract, a service contract to have a guy come in and mow your lawn. You know, you got a lot of lawn service company that's going to come in and mow your lawn, trim your trees, you know, all that stuff. You got a service contract and you agree to pay them and they agree to do the work, right? Well, what happens when the guy breaks his leg and he can't mow your lawn? Well, obviously, you got a non-performance contract. You know, he's not able to perform on his contract. So you have two choices. You can hire someone else to do it, or you can do it yourself, baby. And when you don't hire someone else to do it, it implies that you're going to do it yourself. If it's going to get done, right? What should have happened is that our subcontractors should have informed the people of this country what was really going on. And the people of this country should have been enabled at that point to go, oh. And the Federation should have been allowed to come forward and claim the property of the Federal Republic because we were the delegators of all the mutually shared powers. And that includes the shared powers that were wielded by the Confederation. So the moment all that stuff happened, we should have been contacted as the Federation, and all the American people should have been contacted. It should have been blown out in headlines from here to Toulouse. You know, we should have had all of that out there in the public. And instead, our subcontractors acted in bad faith and literally kept it secret. Shh. Nobody should know. Okay? So they seized upon the assets of the Federal Republic, and they seized upon the employees, the personnel of the Federal Republic. And at the same time, they started their whip, beat, slander, and ambush the actual officers of the Federation. Our great-great-uncle Clint Wood was one of the officers of the Federation, and as you have been told, he was ambushed on his way home with the Great Seals of the United States and the Great Seals of the United States of America. And they were stolen from him. And he was not only accused of being a horse thief, he was accused of being a rebel. And so that's how they drove the actual government of this country underground, under threat, when they were sworn to protect us and were hired to protect us. So between suppressing the Federation and keeping everything secret, they got away with it.
Okay, next question. What would you suggest for expressing a private trust using UCC1 as a first line of defense? And for example, 508C1 as a faith-based ministry. Thank you.
I wouldn't get involved in any of it. It's all ludicrous. It's all fraudulent. It's all completely bunko. You are exempt. You are literally exempt from federal taxation. Why? Because you're not federal citizens. It's as simple as that. Are you responsible for the taxes of an Irishman from Ireland? You can volunteer to pay his taxes for him if you want to. You can make this a gift. But are you liable for the taxes of a Spaniard in Spain? Same answer, folks. No, you're not. You're exempt from paying his taxes. You don't have to pay his taxes. You can volunteer. You can give it to him as a gift. Do you know what the actual definition of the federal income tax is? It's a gift and estate tax.
Okay, next question. Will the Federation be releasing re-education materials, or does the Federation have a suggestion for educational materials to learn the truth? True math, sacred geometry, telepathy, telekinesis, etc.
Well, I think there's more than enough information out there for people to explore on their own on those subjects. I think that our own history and, the fraud is what we can handle. We can teach people how the government is supposed to be organized and operated so that they have some basis to see how it was supposed to be. And hopefully at some point here, we can be intelligent enough to revisit the treaties that are underlying the constitutions and, update anything of that, or maybe do away with it entirely. I think we have grounds to completely do away with any British involvement in our government at all. So there's that. The problem is that we have to get enough people educated and up to speed to be able to do that. So we've got a lot of educating to do, and we've got a lot of people that need to be clued in here before we can make an intelligent renegotiation and open up that whole can of worms. You have to understand that the constitutions don't stand by themselves. The constitutions are the implementation of treaty agreements that settled the War of Independence. So it's not a matter of us just calling together a Continental Congress and taking out our pens and wiping out this and adding that. No. Those constitutions implement treaties. And they implement treaties in each jurisdiction. The original federal constitution that was passed in 1787, that was set up in 1787, had duties in all three jurisdictions, air, land, and sea. Then the next constitution that was passed didn't replace it, but it was in just the jurisdiction of the sea. And the third constitution in 1790 was in the jurisdiction of the air. So, people tend to think that all these constitutions all had powers in all three jurisdictions, and that's not true. And preponderantly, the very first constitution was 90% land. Okay, it was very definitely a land jurisdiction constitution for the most part, and the land services were vested in that 1787 Constitution. And so when you get to the 1789 Constitution, you see that things are tweaked almost immediately for it to function as a sea jurisdiction implementation. And the same thing with the 1790 Constitution. It was tweaked for air jurisdiction application. But I digress. we don't have the kind of expertise developed yet that would allow us to rewrite the constitutions, much less do we have the combined firepower ready to renegotiate the underlying treaties. And those would be hard fought, because walking out of the War of Independence, the Brits got certain advantages that they would really hate to give up. So we've got a renegotiation process that has to be forced and understood at the treaty level before we can get to the implementation at the contract level, which is the constitutions. And we need a lot of people not only to wake up, but to study hard and to understand the ins and outs so that they can't be fooled and wind up with something worse.
Okay, next question. I've now received 4 notices to complete (parentheses) the American Community Survey. The last states, if you do not respond now, a Census Bureau interviewer may contact you to complete the survey. Do you suggest anything other than the following? Write this across both and return. Refused, return to sender, no contact with the date. Should I use all caps? If I can't avoid a face-to-face, specifically, what should I say and do or not say and do? Thank you.
Tell them that you're exempt from their census. You know, they have a right to do a census of their citizenry. You're not one of them. You're a non-citizen state national. And the constitutions that apply to you say that they get to perform a census once every 10 years. And all that they can ask is the number of people in the household. It's a head count.
Okie dokie. Next question. I'm challenging Wells Fargo on my personal loan. The challenge is about my copyright, not giving permission to capitalize my copyright name. Also telling them to send me a bill, not a statement. Do I send notice or affidavit?
Here's the problem. They're not addressing you. They're addressing the estate. They're either addressing the American Infant Descendant Estate, which is controlled by bar attorneys, or they are addressing the British territorial person, the Franchise Corporation, which is also controlled by bar attorney. So you've got bar attorneys from the Roman Municipal Corporation representing the bank in this case, and you're trying to say, well, wait, I didn't give you permission to use my copyright. But they're going to look back on their books and they're going to say, well, hell yes, you did give us permission to use this, and you know, we can prove it. But it's not you. The British bar attorneys gave the Roman municipal corporations the right to use the copyright right to your name that they surreptitiously purloined. Remember back when you were a baby in a cradle, completely clueless about what was going on? And these harpies came and they stole your identity and claimed that you were a British subject and registered you as a franchise of the British Crown Corporation? Well, they also copyrighted your given name. And they've been making merry with that, using it as a rubber stamp for anything they wanted to rubber stamp. And that's exactly what's happened with that situation you're describing. You think that they're addressing your proper name and that you have something to say about it, but when you look a little closer, you're going to see that it was a loan made to a British subject. And that British subject is a corporation operating under your name, your given name, and they own the copyright to that given name at this moment, though they have no actual right to it and don't have a valid contract allowing them to copyright it. Though that's part and parcel of the entire scam. The only connect that we get to the Roman municipal corporations is through the British Crown corporations. It's a collusion. You know, the British Crown Corporation takes the copyright to your given name so that you've got this thing called Joe Quincy Public Incorporated, right? It's operating under your given name. It looks exactly like you, and they don't even bother to put the word incorporated behind it. So there's no way of looking at it, and there's no way of talking about it without implying that it might be you. You see, they don't put it in quotation marks. They don't say incorporated. They just say your name, and they've got a copyright on your name that you don't know about. So the municipal court is looking at this as, oh, well, this is Joe Quincy Public Incorporated that gave me the right to use this copyright. You see, it was a British Crown Corporation franchise that gave them the right to set up a Roman municipal franchise named after you. And we don't know exactly, you know, what the form of that agreement is. We just know that it exists, and we know that the Pope gets 60% of it because we can read the bank records. But, you know, whether they're leasing you to the Roman municipal franchise or what kind of thing, they're leasing your name and your property to the Roman municipal corporation. So, yeah, how do you get it across to them that you're the actual living man? That you say, oh, I'm the living man. They say, we don't care because, you know, obviously you gave this British Crown Corporation right to your copyright. No, you didn't. But that's what it looks like on paper. And so at each step, they're allowed to say, well, we don't care because you don't exist. You can be ignored. And it's this game of impersonating you.
Okay, we are down to 4 minutes left, and we have no questions that you can answer in under 15. You're on a roll tonight.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to
Oh, it's
be...
okay. By the way, I might have to bring a little 19-month-old with me to work one of these days because he keeps staring at the screen saying Grana, hi, and waving.
Come bring him to me and I will give him hugs.
Okay. All right. I'll see you in the morning, boss.
Good night, everybody. God bless. Have a good week ahead. Don't let your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid.